Welcome to Sew with Monty. In this video, I'm going to show you how to sew a basic camp shirt or casual button-down shirt. I have used a men's pattern, but I've modified it to fit me by using the size small, which fit in the neck, shoulders, and armhole, but I've let the hip out a little bit, made a little A on it so that my hips fit better and also shorten the length. This pattern consists of 7 pieces. There's the sleeve, the back yoke, the pocket, the back, the front, the collar, and the front facing. We're going to start the series with a video on setting the pocket, how to make the pocket and set it, and the collar. So let's get started on those items. So I've pulled the pockets and the collar out of my pieces for my shirt. My collar has interfacing adhered to one side only, the other side is plain, and I've put the 2 pieces face to face. I'll sew along the top edge of my collar in a moment, but let's talk about the pockets first. I have notches here where the top folds down and creates the top edge of the pocket, and the rest of it's a basic rectangle. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fold over the outside edges, the sides, and I'm going to pin them at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I don't want to press above the notch. I'm just going to press to the notch, but I want to make sure I keep a good 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to pin on both sides like this. And I'm going to do both pockets this way, but I'm going to do this one just to save time to show you. Now to make sure I've got a 1/2 inch, I'm using my seam gauge and laying it on top to make sure that I am at a 1/2 inch. If you've sewn a long time, you may not need the seam gauge. If you are not sure what a 1/2 inch looks like, definitely keep the seam gauge handy. And then we're just going to bump press. We'll do this to both pockets like I said before. I'm just going to do one for time's sake. And once you have this pocket pressed, I really didn't want to press up there, but it's okay that I did. I'm going to take the bottom edge now, down here, and I'm going to turn it up as well, 1/2 inch, and press along this edge. So I'm going to put my pins in, check to make sure I'm a 1/2 inch, and then press this down as well. Now I'm using glass head pins. If you're going to do pressing and pin, you need to use steel or glass head pins so you don't melt the plastic onto your fabric. Now, this could be good enough. If you turn it over to the right side, as you see, I've got nice crisp corners. That could be good enough, except if I'm sewing and this moves, I could end up with this little tail sticking out here when I sew. So to ensure that's not going to happen, I'm going to open up my folds and I'm going to fold the corner in so that the fold lines that I just pressed in there are matching. Then I turn over the 2 corners to create a miter fold in here and a nice crisp point. So you want to make sure you fold it nice and tight, and then once I have that, I'm going to pin it down. And I'm going to do this on both sides. I want to fold so that the folds are on top of each other, and I fold in the edges so that I have a nice clean sharp miter point. Once I have that, I'm going to press across the bottom once more and rearrange these points so that they are now pressed with a miter fold in there. This fold will ensure that nothing will be sticking out the corners of my pocket once I sew it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the top edge, and I'm going to come in here and fold this top edge down 3/8 of an inch. This is going to give me a clean finish on my top hem of my pocket. So I'm going to turn it down, just checking to make sure I'm 3/8, and then I'm going to press this down as well. And then I'm going to turn it over to the right side, and I'm going to fold the pocket at the notches and pin it so that I can sew across this edge and capture the turned up edge on my pocket hem so that I have a clean finish. Now the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to take these 2 sides and put my corners together and make sure that I'm the same height. I don't want one side of my pocket taller than the other. So if those two are the same, then I know my pocket's nice and even. Also, if your fabric's very lightweight, you can cut a strip of interfacing just for this section right here and adhere it to this edge of the pocket to give it some body. But I'm leaving mine alone. I've got two folds here and I like it rather soft. So this pocket is ready to take to the sewing machine and show you how to sew. I'm going to finish this one off and then I'll take you over to the sewing machine. Now we're ready to sew. So I have my top edge turned under and I'm going to sew right along these two outside edges at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Remember that I have chosen a 1/2 inch because I've altered my pocket to fit me. It's smaller than the original pattern because I'm using a man's pattern. I've got my needle centered and I've also got my stitch set on 3. This way if I do need to rip, I'm not going to have a hard time getting it out. Plus I like the looks of the 3 better. It's a little bit better spacing. So once you have the top edge on both sides sewn, you want to take the corners and you want to cut them at an angle. This way they don't cause bulk when you turn this corner out. And then I take one side, preferably the side that's turned under, and cut it to about half the width. This is grading the seam, and this also takes a little bulk out of here. Now another thing you can do, if you're using a very thick fabric, this little point where you folded the bottom corner down, if it's too much and it's causing bulk in here, you can take it off here. Now my pocket's not doing that, but you can cut this off. Just stay about at least 3/16 away from the actual corner. So let me finish trimming my pocket and then I'll show you the next step. So I have my 2 pockets pressed now and I've got it nice and crisp on the inside and out. The last thing I want to do is just to make sure, and you may want to do this in the process, is that put your 2 pockets on top of each other and make sure that they're very close to the same size here. So we're going to take it back over to the machine and sew the top edge of our pocket and they'll be ready to be attached to our front shirt. So now it's time to sew the top edge of our pocket. I want to make sure that I catch this underside. Now you can sew it on the underside if you wish, but if you're going to sew it on the top side, make sure that you can feel the fold in here and that your needle is inside the fold when you sew it. That's going to give me 1.25 inches turned down on my pocket, which I like. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this using a 3 stitch length so it looks nice. And I'm going to go forward just slightly at the beginning, about 3 stitches, and then back up and then carry on forward, making sure I line the folded edge of my pocket up with the gauge on my machine so I keep it nice and straight. And I'm going to come all the way off the other edge, back up about 3 stitches, come back off, and then I'm going to align my second pocket up in the same manner. That way I know that they are the same distance from the top edge. So I go forward just slightly, back up just a little bit, and then come off, keeping my folded edge aligned to the grid at the selected point on my machine. I get all the way to the other side, get close to the edge, back up just slightly, and come on off. Now my 2 pockets have been hemmed and I know the hems are the same distance. The next part will be putting them onto the front of the shirt itself. I'm going to pin my pocket. I've made marks with a fabric marker on my shirt. Make sure you use a marker that won't damage your shirt so that you don't see the marks later. And I'm going to take my pins and I'm going to pin my pocket to my shirt. And it's a little hard to see because the pattern is sort of washes the pocket right out. But I just want to pin my pocket just beyond the points. Now my points are just inside my pocket edge. That way I don't have any risk of them showing when I sew the pocket on. I'm putting my pins in at a 45-degree angle to the corners. And then I'm going to take it back over to the sewing machine and I'll show you how to sew this on. So now it's time to set our pocket. And I've got mine pinned on here with my pins, 45-degree angle in the corners. Now, normally, most people will set it by starting at the corner going forward, backing up, and coming around. I'm going to show you a little bit different method of setting this pocket. It looks a little nicer, and it also gives you a more reinforced finish. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from the seam that hems the pocket, start there, and we're going to come at an angle, spacing about 1 good stitch away from the edge here. So we're going to start right here, and I'm going to put my needle in. I'm going to center my needle first because I want it in the center. I'm using a 3-stitch length, and I'm going to go pretty close to the edge, like a 1/16 to an 1/8 away from the edge. And then I'm going to come around at an angle here. It's just a slight angle to this upper edge of the pocket. So we're going to go from right here. Let me get over just a little bit more. There we go. I'm going to go up at an angle, just a slight angle, not a huge angle. And then when I get to the top edge, just before I hit the fold line, I'm going to put my needle in, turn around, and then I'm going to make 1 stitch in this direction, which lines me up now to come down the side. I have a triangle. I started at the seam, the top stitch that holds my pocket hem down. I came up at an angle, went over 1 stitch length, and then I came down the side. I've lifted my foot, kept the needle in, and I'm going to go around the whole pocket this way. So I'm going to go up to the edge, and just before I get to the fold, I'm going to put my needle in, lift my foot up, and I'm going to come over 1 stitch, just like I did on the other side, only now I'm going the opposite direction. And then I'm going to angle down to this line. Now, when you get down to this line, I didn't do it when I started, but you can, when you get down to your hem line, if you want, see I'm going slow, you can back up just slightly. But you don't want to overdo that because you don't want a big blob of thread. And once you have that, just trim all of your strings, and you have this really nice finish on your pocket. Little, like a long, skinny triangle. And it holds the pocket on really nice. It's very strong. And that's it for setting the pocket. Join me in the next video and we'll start working on the collar.